Don't worry about being late. I don't have children, Jim, so you get all the flexibility in the world. How'd it go?
Oh, it was good. Yeah, we're at a I guess you would call it a private school. It's really more of a co-op, but they do every year they do an outdoor kind of like barbecue and meet and greet, and they do a lantern walk out in the woods on the property. And it was a nice way to meet everybody because like in the mornings, because we're dropping off now, right? Mm-hmm. We basically just drive off the kid, and then in the afternoon we pick them up, and there's really no time to socialize and really get to meet the parents face to face. The other parents. I mean, we're on Slack and we're on like social media and stuff, so we kind of chat that way. But it's a different experience to actually talk to somebody, face to face. And we were all masked and socially distanced and stuff, which was good, but it was just nice to get out. And it's in the low 40s here in Virginia, so it's been nice. Yeah. And finally, because I was so tired of the heat and the humidity, but it's finally, the weather's gotten nice, and we had a fire, and we cooked up some brats and had hot cider and all that stuff. So it was a good evening, but it just took a while to get everything cleaned up and then get home and get the kid to bed. So
yeah, I know.
I appreciate your patience.
No problem. I know at my company too, we're starting to go out, and we have properties spread all over California. And so we have a goal to meet every single one of our employees at the sites by the end of December. So it's been weird and nice seeing humans again in person. It's been kind of strange. And maybe people will get back to tabletop RPG too. I hear people are drifting back out of the virtual world back into tabletop.
Yeah, that would be nice. I've got my two dear friends live about 20 minutes from me, and we're all just trying to be safe. And I haven't really seen them face to face in 2 years now. And we chat all the time online and stuff, but it's not the same. And I want to get back to playing games and card games and board games and RPGs and stuff with them. And it's just we're just waiting for everybody to get vaccinated.
Well, that's what we're all about. I mean, we are now in our third episode of Continuing Conversations. Yep. For those of you who are just patching in for the first time, the purpose of this podcast is to talk about all things Star Trek Adventures. Now, this includes announcing latest releases, highlighting professionals and fans associated with the game, explaining game rule and mechanics, exploring how to be a better GM or player, discussing the wider Star Trek verse in relation to STA, and answering your questions about what I feel is the best RPG game ever. Now, I'm Michael Dismuke, freelance writer for Star Trek Adventures, contributor to Continuing Mission, the #1 fan site for the Star Trek Adventures game, and your average geek. And today we have with us the amazing parent that we just heard about, Jim Johnson, writer, gamer, Star Trek Adventures project manager, popcorn lover, and cat minion. And we're moving into chapter 3. Your week was great then, it sounds like, Jim.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that last bit.
I said, and it sounds like your week was great, so we're ready to go into actually chapter 2 today of the Gamemasters module, right?
Yeah, for sure, man. I'm ready to rock into it.
Okay, so for all of those who, again, are tuning in, we're going chapter by chapter through the new Gamemasters guide. Later on, we'll get to the player's guide. As Jim mentioned in our last podcast, chapters 1, 2, and 3 of both the Gamemasters and player's guide cover much of the same material, a little bit tweaked for Game Master or player. But today we're talking about chapter 2, which both Game Masters and players will enjoy. And it's about the Star Trek universe in play, society, technology, and service protocols. So what I do is I get to pick Jim's brain about each one of these chapters and how Game Masters can best use them. So let's jump right in it. I really love this one. Talk to us about the society chapter 2.1.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that I really wanted to do with this chapter was to give everybody, not to give everybody, but to present a primer on the setting, right? So just to you're coming into the setting, maybe you're new to Star Trek, you don't know much about the setting, you don't know much about the game. You've seen a couple of the episodes maybe, and you're like, okay, what makes this setting different than other game settings, right? Like what kind of a character can I play? What would my character be expected to know in Star Trek, right? And so this chapter is really kind of set up to kind of like explain just the basics, right? Like it's a science fiction setting, but there's all these elements that are key to it. Like you get your religion, your spirituality, you got different cultures all kind of working together in the Federation or independent.
Let's talk about that. On page 22, there's an inset box about religion and spirituality. And I know it's hard for us right now in the 21st century to think about, hey, religion in 400 years, because many religions believe we're not making it out of the next 50, right? So how does religion and spirituality come into play when you're meeting different civilizations with different belief systems? I can't believe you actually got this into one box. How did you do that?
Well, I'll admit that a good chunk of this was written by Nathan Dowdell, who wrote a good chunk of the core book, but also was responsible for doing all the mechanical bits. And so I took all of his stuff and I did a few tweaks to it, but for the most part, Nathan and I are like eye to eye on a lot of this stuff. And like, so a lot of what he wrote here, I completely agreed with. And the basic gist is that, Gene Roddenberry, of course, was not particularly religious and believed that there wouldn't be any religion in the Star Trek, in the 22nd, 23rd century or whatever. And just didn't really play a big role in the early Star Treks. And then I'd say when DS9 came out, right, DS9, the Bajorans had a very, very clear spiritual belief system. And they've been able to touch on, or the producers of Star Trek have been able to touch on other faith systems that are present in other cultures, which, totally makes sense to me, right? So like, theoretically, if Gene Roddenberry thinks, well, humanity wouldn't have a faith system, then, there's so many other species out there in the Federation, you can bet at least one of them is going to have some belief system. But in my opinion, like if you think about humanity for 7, 8, 9,000 years, we have had organized religions, we've had written religions, and there is no way, like in my opinion, unless there's a cataclysmic world war, knock on wood that there isn't, I just don't see religion going away. Because like if you think about, Christianity obviously is a key one, right? And that's been around for 2,000 years. There's no way in 300 years it's going to go away. Same thing with Islam, with Judaism, just any faith system. Like you think about the ancient Egyptians, right? The ancient Egyptians were around for 4,000 years, and their belief system changed, over those 4,000 years, but it still largely stayed relatively consistent for a long time. And it just, I just can't see it happening.
Humanity is spirituality, always has been, and so it's going to be there. Yeah, and so that's something to think about. I love how it's very high level, 10,000 foot. In that inset box. But for, again, a new game master coming into the Star Trek universe and for world building, these are some key elements just to think about. We give you the seeds of what kind of is, but again, you could take it where you want to as a game master. You did it a couple other times. And I have to say one last thing about the religious and spirituality thing. If people have not picked up Coda, which is the latest trilogy, which is wrapping up 20 years of Star Trek, book number 2 really focuses on the Bajorans and their spirituality. And it's just, I honestly never really liked the Bajorans until Coda book number 2.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so that's a little spoiler. I won't go into it, but if you really want a primer on Bajorans and their spirituality all in one place, not watching 7 seasons of DS9 that you want to, I thought that the writers did a really good job with painting a picture of what it's like.
Nice.
That particular religion. You also covered things like the economy. Give us a briefer on how much money do I need, in order to get around the Federation.
Well, it was pretty brief. Like I know we talked about the economy a little bit in the I think it was in the Beta Quadrant book. There's a couple, not even a chapter. It's like a page worth of mentioning the economy. But the reason it's important to talk about the economy, just at least as a 10,000 foot view, is to say that this is the 22nd, 23rd, 24th century. Money's not important anymore. And I know that's really super hard for us to comprehend in the 21st century in our, capitalist or post-capitalist society where, like, of course money's important. It's what drives the world, really, for good or ill. But now you're in a setting where, like, all your basic necessities are covered. Like you don't have to worry about anything. You don't have to worry about going hungry. You got all the food you can want. You got everything you can drink. Any kind of like tchotchke or toy or thing that you could possibly want, you can just replicate. Exactly. Like you want the Hope Diamond, go replicate it. You got the Hope Diamond, right? If you want some fancy car, then go replicate the parts for it and build it. You're done. So like the society has changed because like there's no want anymore. And so for characters in the setting, money's not the driving factor for them. Like you go do a job because you want to do it, not because you're getting paid to do it or because you need the money. That's it's right. Just like, what do you want to do that will better yourself and maybe even better society as a whole, right? And exactly. So economy is just not a thing anymore. And I mean, I like that as a game master, right? Because then I don't have to worry about, my players going off on a shopping trip, or I have to figure out how much loot am I going to give them this session.
Exactly. Yeah, for grabbing from another franchise, there's no Spider-Man, poor Spider-Man, rich Tony Stark, yeah. That is one reason I think people want to join Starfleet is because, you can stay on Earth, fine, live life, but you can also see the stars and meet other civilizations. This section closes on one of the most confusing pieces in Star Trek, which is star dates. And it gives a little advice to players because, every show seems to open up with a star date. What's your advice to them, Jim, which is kind of summing up this section?
Yeah, I threw in a sidebar, and basically, star dates, they've never really been consistent in Star Trek. And so it's like, well, I acknowledge that in the writing and just say, you know what, it's not consistent. So just kind of like, here's some parameters. If you're running an original series campaign, kind of set your star dates between 1000 and 9999 and call it good. Or you can just use the Gregorian calendar, just make it April 15th, 27, whatever the date is, right? Enterprise did it. Discovery does it a little bit, and then if starting with Next Generation, like Next Gen, DS9, Voyager, and then the Next Gen movies, they actually followed a pattern, right? They actually established a set pattern, and it's nice to just drop your star dates into that pattern, especially because you can go look at a timeline or a chronology or something and see where your episodes slot into the the meta canon, and if some Star Trek Next Gen episode happened on stardate 44123 and your episode is 44126, then maybe you can reference those Next Gen episodes if you felt like it, right? Like I know some gamer groups like to fit into the canon to some extent, so we provide some guidance.
Yeah, and there's a Star Trek Adventures tips and tricks. Is if you want to, there's plenty of ways you can Google Star Trek Stardate Calculator, and there's a bunch of free ones out there. So that if you want to correspond it with Gregorian calendar dates, then you can also kind of compute them. They're not all perfect in agreement, so don't trip about that. Just pick one and go with it. No one will come to your house and beat you up. Okay, so going back to what you were talking about. When we were talking about the money issue is technology. You talked about replicators, and I love the chapter 2.2 on gadgets and gear and all the technology we see. I have to say, it kind of compared to episode 3 of Prodigy, that is one of the recent releases. And I loved how, without too many spoilers, hologram Janeway in 22 minutes basically gave a newbie a tour of what the Star Trek universe is about. Federation, but she also did a tour of the ship and talked about most of the major technology. And I felt like this chapter modeled that. So what was the purpose of the chapter, Jim? What were some of the things you'd want to highlight to new game masters?
Yeah, and I think you hit on it exactly what you said, is that the first chapter or the first section of this chapter, we talked about culture, society, religion, just trying to set a baseline for game masters and players, or at least I guess in this case, the game masters, since this is the game master's guide we're talking about. We do the same thing in the player's guide, just from a different lens, right? I mean, the chapter headings are the same, but the content is very different because we're approaching it from two different perspectives. And especially this chapter, we made sure to not just explain what the technology is, like what is a cloaking device, what's a communicator, what's a phaser, what's a transporter, and not just explain like on a high level how they work. Like we didn't go into like a technical manual level of detail because that's not the point of this book. You can go buy a technical manual, and I encourage you to, because the Star Trek next gen technical manual is still in print after 30 years. This thing is super popular. I'm on my third copy because I've worn so many of them out. Yep, there it is. And I love the book. It's so packed full of great detail. And the last thing I wanted to do was try to rewrite that, because there's no reason to. It's still available I think it's even available in PDF format now. I think you can get it digitally off of various websites, legal websites, not pirating it. But grab a copy of that, and then that'll tell you everything you need to know about Star Trek technology. But for the newbies, especially, we wanted to give like a basic understanding of what the key pieces of technology were. But also for the Game Master guide, we wanted to provide the Game Master with a load of advice on, like, here's what you can do with this piece of technology to either break it or to change it in such a way that your players are challenged. Right. So, like, here's some things you could do with a cloaking device. Here's some things you can do with a communicator. Here's how the universal translator works in conjunction with the communicator, and how if you bust it, your players have to come up with a new solution for foreign languages and stuff. Right.
I want to whet people's appetites, though, just for those who haven't bought the book and are thinking about it. It covers, you're going to learn about the basics about cloaking device, communications, the universal translator, hologram technology, propulsion, warp drive, sensors, shuttlecraft, tractor beams, shields, a little primer on time travel, and weapons, including starship weapons, transporter systems, replicators. So those are the main terms and technology you're always going to see in Star Trek. Mm-hmm. So I know a lot of people are nervous, like, oh, there's so much, but it's put in such simple terms, it's digestible. And what I really liked was the quote someone put in here. I don't know who wrote this chapter. I think it was Aaron. Did Aaron Paulier write this chapter?
He wrote a lot of it, yeah.
Yeah, he wrote a lot of it. I'm not sure if he picked the quote or not, but I thought it was perfect. And this is important for new players of the game. Lieutenant Commander Spock says, instruments register only those things let me start again. Instruments register only those things they're designed to register. Space still contains infinite unknowns. And what I thought was perfect about that quote is, though these are the basic technologies you're going to see in Star Trek on a repetitive basis, your imagination is actually the limit. So you can come up with bigger, better, different, awkward, odd. So again, I just thought this was a good primer for newbies to the game.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly the point, because we want to give everybody the common framework for all the most common things that they're going to encounter in any Star Trek episode, whether they're Federation or Klingon or Romulan, or whatever species you're playing. They all use common technology.
Exactly. I thought one of the funny inset boxes was on page 42. Why doesn't an enemy just fire a torpedo into someone's sun? Kind of like take out the enemy by taking out their homeworld. So I thought that was a really fun inset box. And then there's another inset box that considers the era of Star Trek you're playing. So we already we're going to talk a little bit more about eras in play in a future episode, but it also shows you how to tweak the technology based off that. A lot of information in what I think is a pretty short chapter. It's pretty amazing, actually.
Yeah. Well, that was efficiency, right? Like we had certain. Well, I had, when I set up the outline, right, we set up certain parameters for each chapter, and everybody came through, and a little judicious editing here and there got it in. So in a few pages we packed as much information as we could in there.
Yeah. Now, we've emphasized a lot. The last section of chapter 2 is good, because we've emphasized a lot about how Star Trek Adventures is a different type of RPG game. It's not rock 'em, sock 'em, shoot 'em up. And you're actually kind of joining a Navy in space, but not a Navy that's focused on war, but one that's focused on exploration. And so chapter 2.3 is about service protocols. What was your thinking when you outlined this chapter getting done?
Yeah, so this was kind of an expansion of thought from what I did in the command source book. So I ended up writing a lot of the command source book, at least the first couple chapters. And what I really wanted to get at with this chapter was with the underlying assumption that the vast majority of people coming to play Star Trek Adventures are probably going to be playing Starfleet officers or people working on a Starfleet ship. I mean, that's the overwhelming majority. Even if you're in the Klingon Empire, or if you're playing a Romulan, or if you're playing a different species in their own version of the Starfleet, right? There's still going to be, it's going to be a form of a military probably. And you will probably have protocols that you need to follow while you're on the ship or in the service or whatever. Even independents might have something similar to this. Like if you have an independent trader captain like Cassidy Yates, right? She might run her ship a little bit more formally than not, right? And so there's standard procedures that you follow that, either on Starfleet or not. That
why this makes sense. I just want to interject here that why this makes sense is any species that's going to get into space has to have an organized way to do it. And so whether it's the Cardassian Union, the Klingon Empire, or the Federation, these are worlds that have, through collaboration, got into space. And of course, with collaboration comes systems of management. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about protocols.
Right. So it's just, and it's stuff you see on the show all the time, right? Like, what does yellow alert mean? What does red alert mean? What would an away team or a landing party reasonably expect to do when they're off on an away team or a landing party? And so, in the Game Master Guide, we talk about, here's things you can do with a landing party, or here's things you can do with an away team. Here's the expectations that players should have going into it. Like maybe someone who's never even watched Star Trek says, "Oh, I'm going on an away team. What does that mean? Do I have a phaser? Do I have a tricorder? Am I bringing a medical kit? Like, I don't know. Like, what's the basic underlying process here?" And so we just kind of like walk through that a little bit, just to kind of like just help newbies get a baseline understanding of what their characters can be doing as part of their job in Starfleet or the Klingon Empire, whatever.
Yeah, and you gave a primer on the Prime Directive 2 on page 52. I think that's important because the Federation, at least, is the one organization in our part of the galaxy that follows the Prime Directive. So if you are on a Starfleet vessel, it's kind of important to know what it is, whether you choose to follow it or not. So that's in there. One of the biggest things I love, though, was on page 54. It's something I didn't notice I've done because I grew up watching Star Trek, but you have a Starfleet's naval tradition, 3 pages of that. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so of course I'm a huge fan of nautical fiction and naval history and all that stuff, and of course Roddenberry was too. And Roddenberry read the Horatio Hornblower novels by C.S. Forester, and so it harkens back to that classic Royal Navy 1800s Age of Sail kind of thing, where there's a very clear naval maritime tradition built into Starfleet, where you've got all the nautical terms and terminology, where it almost feels like submarines in space basically, but all the nautical terms are there present on the series, and they just carry that forward series after series. And I thought, well, if you're somebody new to not only new to Star Trek, but also maybe you've never served in the military, maybe you have no idea of what naval heritage or naval terminology is, this is a primer. This is a real quick and dirty 3-page primer on some of the key terms that you're going to hear all the time on Star Trek episodes that, if you don't understand the shorthand, you might be like, what the heck does that mean? Right? I mean, and it's even basic stuff like, heave to, hard a port, move your bulkhead, captain on the bridge, clear the bridge, just these basic terms that for those of us who've been watching Star Trek forever are like second nature. We don't even think about it, right? Because we know the language and the lingo.
Well, it's so cool that even it teaches us how to pronounce it, like bow. It's like, B-O-W. When it talks about the front of the ship, bow. I didn't know that. I didn't figure that out until I think I was like 18 years old or something. I was calling it the bow every time I read. So I just thought it was so cool how it dignifies the reader and gets you caught up with that language and that culture really quickly.
Yeah, and trust me, this is a 3-page sidebar primer that could have been a whole book unto itself. In fact, I've got a book on the shelf. I'm an avid reader of the Patrick O'Brien, Aubrey Maturin novels, and I mean that's like a 17-book series. But somebody, I don't even remember who, wrote a whole book on the nomenclature and the lexicon and the glossary of terms for these, because of course the books are all about the naval Age of Sail and stuff. And so like you could just go for days and days and days with all these military historical nautical terms, right? And just really add it into your Starfleet game. But like that's for like the really obsessive people. So if you're not that obsessive, go with the basics and just, go from there.
Gorgeous. One of the things I like to do on continuing missions is not only highlight the writers, but also highlight the artists. Yeah. There's something really cool. There's a design that's on page 56. And people might be wondering what it is. I'd like to explain it to them in case they're newbies to Star Trek. Do you want to talk about that cool Vulcan design there?
Well, you got me in a box here, because I can tell you it's definitely Vulcan, right? But that is those are some design aesthetics that we had access to by virtue of being a licensor or a licensee with Viacom CBS. We have access to their asset library, and in their asset library are all kinds of artwork and icons and border designs and patches and just like all the different stuff you see on the TV show or in one of the official publications or something. Sometimes that artwork finds its way into their asset library, and we're able to use literally anything we want out of it.
Well, I'll remind the people who are listening, it's on page 56, and the people who are watching, will put a picture up of it. But I will say that I'll tell you what I think it is, and then people will, of course, correct me if I'm wrong, because there's experts out there. I think it's actually the language saying infinite diversity, infinite combinations, the one on the left. I think that's what that is. Okay. I don't know what the one on the right is, so I was really, really curious about those, but I thought they were cool touches to this.
Yeah. I honestly don't know. I can't read Vulcan. I don't know that many people who can. So if anybody, if you see it or you buy the book and you look at it and you're wondering, or if by all means let me know, and I'll figure out a way to thank you for it. But it's just a design aesthetic, but whatever.
Well, no, that's a perfect segue, because if they're going to reach out to you, how are they going to contact you, Jim, as we wrap up this chapter about society, technology, and service protocols, GM Guide, Chapter 2. So how can they reach out to you if they want to tell us what these symbols mean?
Yeah, sure thing. Best way to reach out to me is by email, jim@modifius.com, or you can go on Twitter. I'm on Twitter all the time. It's @ScribeNetti. I'm on all the social channels for the game. So Star Trek Adventures, if you're on Facebook, Discord, the subreddit, the official forums, I'm not hard to find. I'm the one talking incessantly about this game. So reach out, chat with me anytime you want. Anytime you got questions, let me know. And look forward to chatting with you.
Cool. And again, we want to entertain those questions. Jim will always mention if there's a question that he gets online, he'll bring it up here. But keep sending those to us. Did we have any questions this week, Jim?
Not that I can recall. I think I ended up answering all the questions on Facebook or Discord, I think. So no new questions in my email, though.
There's one I'll bring up because I keep up with a lot of the chats, and I woke up this morning rubbing my eyes because there had been this big discussion about it. And I want to honor fans of Star Trek RPGs, old and new, from all time. I know how it's been to convert gaming systems. For instance, I played Marvel for 30 years and had 4 different gaming systems, and it's a hard thing to switch. But I want to give honor to all the writers and creators from all eras, because they were doing, frankly, what they were paid to do. Work on a game system. We're not allowed to use old material, so you got to create new rules. And so when I know on our forums, we always keep the peace, but we don't want to be slamming anybody of the systems, because a lot of the reasons we're constrained is just what I said, licensing issues. We want to encourage people to try this game, and I also encourage people to try other systems and make it all work to get the best game that works for you. Do you have anything to say about that?
No, I don't think so. I think I've tried to. I mean, I've got all the old games on my shelves, and I use them all the time for reference material. Or even just inspiration, like when I was working on the command source book, it feels like forever ago now. I had the Last Unicorn Games stuff, and I had the Decipher stuff, and I had some Fastest stuff open, and I was cross-referencing. I mean, like I had my desk literally covered with Star Trek RPG books, because I wanted to make sure I was not just kind of advancing what we've done, what has come before, but that I was trying to honor what had come before too, right? So I was trying to drop in little references to the fastest stuff and to the Last Unicorn stuff and to the Decipher stuff, because like gamers like you and me who've been through this for a long time and have been gaming for 20, 30 years, like we know this stuff backwards and forwards. And it's always nice to, I feel it's always important to respect and honor the folks who've come before you and have kind of like blazed the trail and then continued the path forward. And now we're adding to it, right? And in 30 years, somebody else will be doing a Star Trek RPG, and probably. Ain't gonna be me.
Right. The cool thing about Star Trek Adventures RPG from Modiphius is it's current, it's new, it's expanding the universe, it's getting new fans into RPG. So let's keep those doors wide open to get as many people. I'm always thinking to myself, I want people to play because I want new material. But the only way new material is going to come out is if people purchase the current material, and keep it going. So that's just a comment I wanted to make, because I know I appreciate everyone who contributes and shares ideas on converting systems and stuff like that. Continuing missions is always there, and of course Modiphius is out there bringing in the best talent, not the best talent, but some of the best talent. Both artists and writers. So
keep us humble, Michael.
Yeah, let's not get in trouble.
I do want to add one thing to that, and I think this is one of the angles you were taking at is especially for the gamers who've been playing old systems for a long time, and like that's what and that's what you want to convert to. That's great, fine. Absolutely convert to what you're familiar with, but also don't be afraid to try something new, right? Because some of those systems are 30 plus years old, and like if you think about game theory and game design that has progressed over 30 years, we're in a very different world now than we were 30 years ago. Not just the real world, but in game design, and especially for Star Trek, I think to really get that Star Trek feel to the table, I think it almost demands kind of a more dramatic, narrativistic kind of, fast and loose system where if you have a system that's really focused on shield points and weapon damage and stuff, it may not bring the same feel. I mean, of course, if you use that kind of system and you're able to get the Star Trek feel that you like, more power to you.
Well, some players from different generations too just aren't as patient. They're not going to come to your house and sit at a table. I'm talking from personal experience with my nieces and nephews who I wrote a lot of the chapters of this book about. I knew that their attention span is different. It's not better. It's not worse. It's different because of how social media and TV shows have changed the writing of how they assimilate information. And so I've noticed that these books are trending. Just so you know, 3 of my nieces and nephews have read these books. 4, actually. Someone just texted me today about the art. And they're loving it. They're like, I want to play. So I'm up to 4 nieces and nephews right now who read the book and are like, when are we getting down to play? So I now have my new crew, which is cool. But just for people who've been around for a long time, just understand learning does change, and these books are written for multiple learners. And we're doing these podcasts and video casts because of that also. Some people don't have the time or means to read a book. So we're doing blended learning and offering a new way for them to get into RPG, because we want to be ready for every combination and every diversified person wanting to play the game, right?
It in action, my friend.
Cool. All right. So now let's close it up. Just why don't we remind people where, if they want to pick up the book, the best way to do so. And then if you want to give shout outs or thank yous to any of the other companies out there that you're collaborating with.
Yeah, go to modiphius.net, and that's modiphius.net. Or if you're in the United States or North America, go to modiphius.us. They just recently opened up a US web store, so it'll save you on shipping. So you don't have to pay the shipping costs from the UK. So check out those 2 stores. Of course, you can order stuff from your friendly local game store. And just make sure that if you do, to reach out to Modiphius support so that you can get the free PDFs for any physical stuff that you buy, because Modiphius embraces the brick and mortar program. So any physical stuff you buy literally anywhere in the world, if you get it as a gift, if you buy it from somewhere else, still contact Modiphius. They'll get you the PDF for free. That's the best way to do it. Want to thank.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I want to thank all the licensees that we work with, the folks at Hero Collector, Eagle Moss, IDW Comics, the folks that do Star Trek Timelines. It's not Disruptor Beam, it's Tilting Point, I think now. And Star Trek Online. You'll see more of us collaborating with them in the future as we've done in the past. And I just love working with other licensees because they know what we do and they know what we do and we know what they do. And we get to share resources and insights and all that good stuff. So thanks to them. And finally, it would not be a complete webcast or podcast or whatever without thanking the fans. The Star Trek Adventures fans are some of the most supportive, passionate people I've ever had the joy of interacting with. And we wouldn't be doing these products without you. So thank you, every Star Trek Adventures fan out there, for playing the game, supporting the game, answering questions online, being supportive of the newbies. Thank you all very, very much. Appreciate you every day.
Fantastic. And I love that you shout out the brick and mortar. So you know what? If you want us to shout out your favorite brick and mortar, go ahead and email Jim. We'll try to get those. Contact me on Facebook if you want to shout out your favorite brick and mortar. I'm going to shout out Game Castle in Fremont, California. Game Castle. I'm shouting them out because they're my favorite place to play. All right. And then we'll get another one. Just send it to us if you want us to give you a shout out. All right. Thanks, Jim. We'll see you next episode.
All right, man.